If there are a couple of questions, we can entertain your questions. There's a question there.
My question is for Rabbi Wolf. If a person is in the end stages of Alzheimer's and they are completely unresponsive and have been for a very long time, and they can no longer swallow, how do you choose whether to put in a PICC or not? Because you don't know if the person could live another year, because with Alzheimer's, there is no date. They can't tell you it's going to be 3 weeks or 3 months or 3 years, because they don't know what's going to happen with the plaque on the brain. So how can you make that decision in a Yiddish ethical way?
I think the question is, how can you determine in certain cases how long a person is going to live and make a decision based on that?
It's a very hard question.
I know.
They weren't going to be easy.
Nobody said it was going to be easy. My reaction is that the nutrition and the hydration are part of their natural life processes, and one would advocate that the person be continue to eat and to drink. Okay, what happens sometimes is that with Alzheimer's patients or people with advanced dementia, they start pulling the PEG out. Okay, when they start pulling the PEG out and they're harming themselves, then you don't necessarily have to put it back. But at the initial point, one would do what is possible. And also in those cases, sometimes they develop pneumonia, and the pneumonia isn't always treatable with antibiotics, because it's part of the breakdown of the body, and then you don't have to continue to treat. So that would be my answer for you.
I guess
The person says, I don't want any care, no heroic measures, nothing. Mandatory says, do everything.
Well, unfortunately, the wishes of the person would be overridden by the mandatory, because naming of a mandatory is an important position. And I'll give you a full answer. I'll give you a full answer. Can you hear me? Okay. Because the person can no longer give valid consent, and can no longer express his wishes or her wishes, then by naming a mandatory in the mandate, he has given that person the right to speak for him, notwithstanding the fact that his mandate says something different. When the difference is so apparent, the court itself, at the time of ratifying or homologating the mandate, may look at it and determine, and the hospital, the caregiver, whoever the case may be, may say, this is not what the person wanted. And therefore, that mandatory can be removed. There's nothing so sacrosanct about naming a mandatory. A person who's been named as a mandatory who does not follow the wishes of that person, as expressed clearly in a mandate, can be removed, and another person named as a curator to that person, and making the decision that would be more appropriate and more in line with what was expressed in the mandate. And not only that, if there are differences, the court can even allow that person to remain as mandatory for certain things, and complete the obligations of that person by a curatorship. You can have a mandate for certain things and a curator for other things at the same time. So if there's an obvious difference of opinion between the individual and his mandate and what the mandatory is doing, then anybody, a friend, a relative, the hospital, can make application to the court to remove him and name someone else.
One thing we suggest is that many people will create an advance directive, and then they don't ever look at it again, and they don't revise it. And things happen in people's life, and you know, we've done it 5 years ago, and we figured it's done, it's over with. The lawyer has it, it's fine. You know who to call, there's a phone number in my purse and everything. But during this 5 years, maybe I don't speak to my brother anymore, you know, who was a very close person to me. Or maybe there's a new person in my life that I'd like that person to make that. Or maybe I have a different, my medical condition has changed, other things have changed. So I think we really do recommend that you look at it. I mean, certainly when there is certain significant changes in your life, just think about it and just say, do I need to do something with this document? Is there something I want to revise? And I think that's very important.
There's a question, just one moment, there's a question here. The question is, what about someone who has Lou Gehrig's or
MS.
or MS, and they're rational, and they can make, then I assume the question is, can they make their own decision? The question is about end of life. If they choose end of life,
Well, it's not.
It's against the law.
It's against the
Against the
law
law.
to do it actively, but they can ask any treatment to be removed. Some of these patients have a respirator because their muscles are not strong enough, or they have a PEG tube, and they may decide to. A lucid person like that would have the right to refuse treatment, but cannot ask to be euthanized. Okay. And actually, a lot of people who refuse treatment, they say to a cardiologist, I'm not taking your pills anymore, I want to die now. But that doesn't work this way. The law is that we can't help them commit suicide. So, but in that case, and I've seen that I've had some ALS patients, and they would say no more artificial feeding. But under the Jewish law, I think that would be not correct. But if it doesn't cause suffering, it's complicated.
yeah.
Okay.
The question is, how long will an application to the court take to process?
I'm smiling because that question is asked to me all the time, and I can really never give you a definitive answer because it varies from case to case, and the clerk or the judge who happens to have the file. My standard answer is it can take anywhere from 6 weeks to 3 months to even longer. I waited for judgment up to 4 or 5 months. So there's never, you're like at a bakery, you just stand in line, pick a number, and hope for it to go as quickly as possible. There was a time when people actually used to pay a clerk to put the file at the top. He subsequently was fired, so that's no longer possible.
When a person's dehydrated, as you mentioned, confusion, we don't know whether the person is refusing to eat and drink because they really don't want to live anymore, or whether they're confused because of dehydration.
If the person is so confused and so depressed that a psychologist or a psychiatrist will determine that this person really cannot make a valid decision for themselves, the courts, the hospitals, many of the cases that I have with me today are cases where hospitals or an interested person apply to the court to force the person who really wasn't making a valid decision for herself or himself to take medication and treatment. And that's why I said that the court deals very well with providing for treatment and not very well with withdrawing treatment. So there are recourses if it's valid, and the court has a right to, as they say, exercise judicial discretion. What does that mean? It's a very gray area.
I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you who have come here today, and to thank our panel, and to present them with a small gift. And thank you for coming, and maybe we'll do it or something like this again next year.